What's up guys, Ruppy here, welcoming you to my draft analysis for Season 5 of the UNPL, the Uva Naranja Pokemon League. In case you aren't familiar with draft format for Pokemon, let me break it down for you quick. It's kinda similar to fantasy sports, where coaches take turns drafting Pokemon to fill out their rosters, then bring what they feel are the best 6 to battle against other coaches from week to week until we ultimately crown a champion. In the UNPL, we were given 115 points to draft anywhere between 9 and 11 Mons for our rosters. But unlike in past seasons with this league, a few things were changed up. Certain Mons that have been notorious for being heavy hitters that always go right out of the gate and are borderline uber according to Smogon, such as Spectrier and Chanpao for example, were banned this season to try to make things a little more fair and competitive. The rules regarding Terra captains also changed this season, which is partially my fault after my Terra captain Gyarados kind of carved a path of destruction last season. Whoops! Anyways, in order to actually give the lowest of the low tier a chance to shine, we were only allowed 12 points total to allocate for up to 3 possible Terra captains. But said captains could only be, with some notable exceptions, Mons that are 6 points or less. We're also going back to the format UNPL has run with in past seasons, where each Terra captain can have up to 3 possible Terra types it could use for battle. However, one change that was made this season was that you did not have to use one of those Terra types on a type the chosen Mon already is if you didn't want to, opening the door for more possibilities to make your Terra captains shine. Somehow, due to forces I can't even begin to comprehend, I managed to repeat my UNPL Spring Fling luck by ending up with the first overall pick, affording me the opportunity to start the draft off as well as have the front wheel pick to plan my draft. This was a unique opportunity for me because it allowed me the opportunity to finally, at long last, try a Mon that I've always wanted to use but never got lucky enough to even consider it because of how the draft order usually ended up for me. For the very first pick of the UNPL Season 5 draft, you know I just had to take Dragapult. Anyone who knows me knows that I love an extremely versatile Mon in this format, which is why I've thrived in this format for years with Mons like Victini and Iron Valiant. And Dragapult may arguably be the single most versatile draft Mon of them all. Base 142 speed is insane, and that alone makes this dragon a nightmare to prep for. But it has some very solid offensive stats and some decent bulk as well. This thing can run physical, special, spread status, set screens, pivot. It's a phenomenal start for a Fairy Dragon Steel Core. Its ghost typing makes it a great spin blocker, and its abilities are no joke either. Clear Body prevents its stats from being lowered, which could make trying to slow down potential Dragon Dance sets extremely difficult. Cursed Body means that any contact with Pult runs the risk of that move being disabled, and Infiltrator means that substitutes and screens will not stop this Mon from tearing through opposing rosters. Dragapult is a fantastic Mon, but now we come to the question of, what do I choose to build around it? With 2 picks coming up due to being the front wheel, I decided to start by maybe borrowing a page from Pokeaim's playbook back in SPL Season 1 by drafting Quaquaval next. Quaquaval covers one of Dragapult's biggest weaknesses in Dark, and in return, Dragapult covers Quaquaval's weaknesses to Electric and Grass. There's quite a big speed gap between them, but that just gives me room to build with, especially since Quaquaval's base 85 speed is more deceptive than you might realize. With moves such as Rapid Spin to remove hazards and Stab Aqua Step, Quaquaval can boost its speed very easily and very quickly. And when coupled with its Moxie ability to gain +1 attack every time it gets a KO, this Dancing Duck can snowball very quickly. Base 120 attack is no joke, and with other moves such as Close Combat, Wave Crash, Aqua Jet for priority, Flip Turn and U-Turn for pivoting, Roost to heal, setup options, and solid coverage, Quaquaval is a Mon that could very easily take advantage of Dragapult paving the way for it, and vice versa. One thing you've probably noticed is that I already have a glaring fairy weakness developing, but I'm going to address that right now, along with another issue. Those of you who have followed me throughout Gen 9 and Draft will know that hazards have consistently been one of my biggest issues, whether it be having reliable setters, or especially being able to get rid of them if I need to. Getting Quaquaval was a great start in addressing this, but I wanted to be absolutely sure I had options on this front so Quack didn't have to do all the heavy lifting. All of this is why my next pick was Excadrill. Not only can Excadrill also spin, but having access to Stealth Rocks and being a reliable setter of them already eases some of my usual concerns. Being a Steel type also kind of patches up that Fairy problem a bit, and a lot of its own weaknesses are covered nicely by Pult and Quack. Base 110 HP and base 135 attack makes Excadrill quite the tank, especially since Ground and Steel is a powerful stab combination, and it can Sword Stance to get even stronger. Mold Breaker is an excellent ability that allows Excadrill to ignore other abilities, such as Levitate, that could get in the way of it doing what it needs to do. But I also have Sand Rush if need be to double drill speed and make it a nightmare to stop. If only I had some sand to make it work though. We'll come back to that later. At this point, one thing that wasn't sitting too well with me was the fact that I had no Ghost Resists to further help out Dragapult. So in my next set of picks, I decided to not only address that, but also add to my Fire Water Grass core by drafting Incineroar next. Incineroar is another mon I've always wanted to try and draft, but have rarely gotten the chance because it's usually off the board by the time I start considering fire types. Fire Dark is a very useful type combination that does allow it to be neutral to Fairy, but it gives me a Ghost Resist and a Psychic immunity to help cover Pult and Quack, not to mention another Ice and Grass Resist for them as well. Incineroar's bulk is incredibly solid, and having Intimidate makes it even better. Base 115 attack is incredibly useful, especially considering some of the options Incineroar has for attacking with, like Knockoff, Darkest Lariat, which ignores the opponent's stat changes, Flame Charge to boost its otherwise lackluster speed, Flare Blitz, and so on. It also gets Parting Shot to join the obscene amount of pivoting potential I've got going on so far, with the bonus of lowering stats on the way out to help something else set up. Now, I need one mon each to finish both my Fairy Dragon Steel core and my Fire Water Grass core, and I'm noticing at this point that I've got a ground weakness forming because of Excadrill and Incineroar. So I decided to kill two birds with one stone and dipped a bit lower in point tiers to solve all of these problems with Whimsicott. Whimsicott's another one of those mons I've been wanting to try and draft and just never had the chance, especially since this thing is incredibly annoying. Its stats may not look too great aside from that base 116 speed that helps close the gap between Dragapult and everything else, but it has two nasty abilities in Infiltrator, which gives me two now with Pult, and more importantly, Prankster. Being able to have priority on any status move makes Whimsicott a tricky threat to face because it has quite a few of them as disposal, notably moves like Encore, Memento, Leech Seed, Taunt, Stun Spore, and Tailwind. True, Prankster doesn't work against Dark types, but considering Whimsicott is part Fairy, that's not a matchup a Dark type really wants to face in the first place. It can also function pretty well offensively with items like Choice Specs or Life Orb, as Grass Fairy is a type combination that gives us some powerful attacks to utilize if the situation calls for it. At this point, I was starting to notice that I was getting a little physical heavy. Sure, I just grabbed Whimsicott, and Dragapult can function as a special attacker, but having another solid attacker on that end would certainly help. Plus, I want another Ghost Resist to further help Dragapult out, which is why I ended up taking Meloetta next. Meloetta is a familiar mon to me, serving as one of my Terra captains back during Season 3 of the UNPL. The few weaknesses it does have with its normal Psychic type combination are already pretty thoroughly covered by other mons at this point, and with base 128 special attack and defense, along with base 100 HP and base 90 speed, Meloetta has a lot going for it. With powerful stab options like Hyper Voice, Psychic, and Psyshock, not to mention covers like Alluring Voice, Dazzling Gleam, Shadow Ball, and Focus Blast, as well as utility in U-Turn and Knockoff, Meloetta can quickly become quite the pain to take down. Plus, if I were to use Relic Song, then not only does that base 128 flip to attack and speed, but Meloetta as a normal fighting type can also function as a great physical attacker if I absolutely needed to, with the bonus of Relic Song potentially putting something to sleep as well. Now, I talked about my hazard issues earlier, and while I have two very reliable spinners at this point, I only have rocks in the form of Excadrill. Plus, I figured I could use a grounded poison in order to better address the possibility of toxic spikes. That's why with my next pick, I took an old friend in Overquill. I absolutely love Overquill. And while I may not really have Rain to take advantage of Swift Swim, aside from manually setting it, I do have Double Intimidate once again alongside Incineroar, as well as Poison Point to punish any attempts to make contact from physical attackers. Base 115 attack is very good, and its bulk is solid as well. But the biggest thing Overqwil gives me is more hazards in the form of both spikes and toxic spikes, in addition to being able to absorb the latter if someone tries to set them up on me. With Powerful Stab and plenty more utility options, Overqwil can be an absolute monster in one form or another in my hands. Now, you've probably noticed that my ground weakness is becoming a problem again. And one thing I really wanted to add was an electric type, which would only add to that issue. Thankfully, I know of another old friend who does resolve this, and that would be Electros. Electros may have great offensive stats, but its bulk is nothing to underestimate as well. This thing has always been a fantastic Assault Vest mon, and was a valuable part of my Season 4 roster, so I'm excited to give Eel the run back. It's another mon that could reasonably go physical or special, it can pivot around with either Volt Switch or U-turn, has solid utility and moves like Dragon Tail to phase opponents out if they're starting to boost up, knock off an Acid Spray, which lowers the special defense by 2 stages guaranteed, and it could even possibly set up with Coil and become a threat with a wide array of coverage moves. We're starting to get close to the end of the draft now, and I'm at the point where, with only 14 points left and needing at least one more mon to call my roster done, I should probably start looking into Terra captains. And one mon stood out to me right away that would make for a very interesting captain. With my next pick, I grabbed Scyther. Scyther put in a surprising amount of work for me over in the BBR D League earlier this year, and being able to run as a Terra captain opens up a whole new world of possibilities. Base 105 speed is a great bridge on my speed tiers at this point, base 110 attack is nothing to scoff at, and its bulk is very solid as well, especially since it can hold Eviolite to get even bulkier. Scyther gives me a Defogger to help out Drill and Quack in removing hazards, it's another ground immunity before Terra, U-turn is its bread and butter, and Dual Wing Beat is a nasty attack that gets boosted by its Technician ability. Since we can run 3 Terra types, I decided to go with Bug, Normal, and Fighting. Bug gives that extra boost to U-turn or other Bug moves, especially if I opt to run Swarm instead for the ability. Normal allows Scyther to have one of the most powerful quick attacks in the game, especially if I set up with Swords Dance beforehand. And Fighting removes a lot of its biggest weaknesses, while also making close combat incredibly dangerous as well. That's 6 points gone for Terra, so let's spend the last 6 points I had to allocate for that on my other Terra captain, Sandaconda. Remember when I said we'd come back to the sand discussion for Excadrill? Well, here's the answer to that. The Sand Spit ability allows Sand to go up whenever Sandaconda takes a hit, and it's got the bulk to be able to do that. Base 107 is usable as an attack stat, and Sandaconda also gives me another Rock Setter to help out Drill on that front. Shed Skin is another handy ability that could allow the snake to heal off any status it's afflicted with, and it can spread some of its own through Glare as well. For Terra types, I opted to go with Ground, Fairy, and Dragon. Ground actually makes sense here in tandem with Sand Spit, so I'm not taking damage from my own Sandstorm while also boosting the power of Earthquake. Fairy works as a natural lure because its weaknesses lie in Poison and Steel types, plus Fire resisting, and all of those do not want to take Earthquakes from the snake. Dragon is also a fascinating option because Sandaconda can take full advantage of moves like Scale Shot alongside Coil to become an extremely dangerous threat very quickly. At this point, I only had 2 points left in my name, and I figured I might as well spend them to have a full 11-mon roster, especially since a special attacker on the faster side could work to balance things out. In that regard, my last pick of the draft is Frogadier. Frogadier may not seem like much, especially considering it's not going to be one of my Terra captains, but perhaps I could find some uses for it this season. Base 97 speed and base 83 special attack are certainly usable, and the fact that it gets Protean and has some decent coverage options could work out for me. It can also pivot with U-turn and set spikes and toxic spikes as well, so I now have a backup to Overqwil in that department if I feel I can make use of it. So, that is my roster for Season 5 of the UNPL. Given the upward progression I've made from season to season so far, I'm hopeful that I can make this roster work for me, and hopefully go all the way. Is it perfect? Not at all. and I feel a lot of people's rosters for the season weren't quite what they were hoping they'd turn out to be, but that's only going to make things more interesting, especially given some of the coaches we have this time around. Make sure to check out all of their draft analysis videos as well and show them some love. That said, I have been Ruppy, and my Columbus Swoo and I will see you all soon to kick off this brand new UNPL season. Take care, guys.